Welcome in, everyone. All right, welcome in. Good morning. I'm gonna give folks another second here to make sure their audio is connected. And then we'll get going.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. Good morning. I hope everyone was able to enjoy some of the sunshine yesterday. If you were able to at least take a walk or get some vitamin D.
That was a beautiful surprise, nice day. I was not expecting it and was very happy with it. So
yes. Yeah.
All right. I think we're gonna get rolling. One of our co-presenters is having some technical issues this morning, so we're gonna kind of get rolling, and we'll roll her in if she is able to reconnect. So welcome. I hope everyone can see my screen all right. This is the Navigating the School System training. This is our first training session of this topic. We will offer it 3 more times over the next year and a half. So if you know somebody who after this training you think would benefit, let them know. There'll be another time to come join us. All righty. So we'll start introducing ourselves. First, my name is Joey. I am the Education Strategy Specialist here at Building Changes. I use she, her pronouns. Today I'm wearing a kind of whitish gray shirt, a orange cardigan. My hair is down and kind of wavy with some glasses. I identify as a white woman. Our coworker, who I do not see back in the room yet, who I'll also introduce, is Samie Iverson. She is the Senior Manager of Education Strategy and uses she, her pronouns. And then I'll pass it over to Mehret.
Good morning. We're so excited to have everyone here. My name is Mehret Tekle-Awarun. I am the Director of Practice Innovation. My pronouns are she and her, but when I'm advocating for students of color and just students, social justice, education services, my pronouns can switch to try me because I feel like when it comes to navigating the school system, it's important we agitate the system a little bit for our children. So thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kayla Blau. I'm a writing consultant with Building Changes, and I previously worked in the school system and also at a domestic violence shelter. Okay, so we'd like to start by acknowledging the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land since time immemorial and who still inhabit the area today. And in the context of this conversation, to really acknowledge the historical harm that the school system has inflicted upon our Indigenous students and continues to do so from boarding schools up until present day. And there will be a link in the chat if you'd like to learn more about the land that you inhabit.
All right, we've been doing Zoom for over 2 years now, as it turns out. So this, you've probably seen this before. So please make sure that your name on Zoom here is updated to reflect how, if you're getting clock hours today through PD Enroller, and I know with this group, that's actually going to be fewer of us. But if you are looking for clock hours, make sure that your name on Zoom matches your name in PD Enroller, so you can do that upper right-hand corner of your little where you are in your screen and rename yourself. That helps with making sure our attendance is accurate and you get credit. Please make sure you keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. We'll have different interactive parts of the training today where you can unmute. We definitely encourage questions. So if you want to pop anything in the chat or raise your hand at different points, engage, that would be amazing. But if you aren't the main speaker in that moment, maybe remaining muted so we don't, hear people's background noise quite as much. There is a live transcript available. You can go kind of to the bottom of your screen and enable that. Or if you're seeing the subtitles and they are not what you want, you can hide them as well. We encourage the use of the reaction buttons, using your hand during Q&A. And if you are comfortable, we would love to see your faces. So if you are comfortable having your video on, please join us with that. One thing that's a little different from previous trainings we've done is We always have an after presentation survey and evaluation. We love your feedback. Normally that's done through PD Enroller for folks who are getting clock hours, but today we also have a Survey Monkey. So this is not to be filled out yet, but I'm dropping it in the chat just in case people have to drop off early. This is our Survey Monkey for after the training today. We want to make sure we get that feedback. We really take it into deep consideration. We're doing these trainings 3 more times. So we'd love to hear what you have to say and how we can improve. All right, so I'm gonna kind of introduce Building Changes real quick. We are, some of you may have seen us in a lot of spaces before. Chances are you may have worked with us and that's how you found out about this training. So thank you for joining. But just in case, so Building Changes is a nonprofit working with and alongside communities across Washington state to explore the intersections of systems serving young people, students, and families experiencing homelessness. Some of our work involves funding innovative ideas, providing technical assistance and training, project and program research and evaluation, and advocacy efforts that aim to change policies to strengthen implementation. Racial equity is at the center of everything we do here at Building Changes, and we are committed to center racial equity internally and externally. So we do this by bringing a targeted universalism lens coined by John A. Powell to our work, which acknowledges equity rather than equality. So we no longer believe that everyone should receive the same level of support, but by believe in prioritizing the needs of those most marginalized, everyone will have a universal benefit. So to be clear, this is not about preference, it's about acknowledging that people are situated differently and have varying needs, and that's why we're all here today, is make sure those needs are met. This is just a quick infographic kind of really explaining why this is so important to the work that we do. 6 out of 10 students experiencing homelessness in the state of Washington are students of color. And this is something that we found through a study that we did in 2019. So if there are around 42,000 students experiencing homelessness in Washington state, and roughly 3/4 of that population are students living doubled up, largely due to financial hardships with friends and family. This also means they won't qualify for mainstream housing resources, and 60% of this population are students of color. So just kind of centering our work today with this in mind. And then very important, how did we get here today? We are here through a contract with and partnership with OSPI, our awesome colleagues in the room. I see a few of them here, so it's great to have you on the call. So we are partnering with OSPI through the ARP, American Rescue Plan, HCY dollars, lots of acronyms, but we're here to provide trainings for McKinney-Vento school staff and community-based organizations serving students experiencing homelessness. So we'll be offering 7 different topics over the next 2 years, each of them 4 times. We're kind of getting through. There are too many acronyms. And we're hoping that you can join us for some future ones as well. And then, sorry, doing a couple different screens here. I'm gonna pass it off to Mehret to talk about what we're doing today.
Thank you, Joey. So here is our agenda for the day. We're going to start right into some PowerPoint presentations on just a little history, a refresher on the McKinney-Vento program for those who may not be familiar with it. Then we're going to talk about the school building and then ways that you can advocate as a school, as a community partner. We are going to provide you with a bio break, a 10-minute bio break, and then we will have some speaker highlights. We have Rose Bidell here from the Office of Education Ombudsman. We have Brad Brown and Adam Kay from the Puget Sound ESD 121. We have Kayla, who is also one of our speakers today, that's going to talk about her experience as a shelter provider navigating the school system for a very vulnerable population. From there, we're going to go into our very interactive eco mapping exercise. We're going to use a new application where you guys will all be involved in submitting some information as well as submitting some information as it's connected to our ecosystem of the education system. So you'll see a couple examples of that, and then we're just going to go into applying it to practice and our call to action from this presentation. So today's objective. Today's objective, we hope that you'll be able to walk away or leave with tools and resources available to advocate the needs of students experiencing homelessness. We hope you'll have the opportunity to network and strategize with your colleagues across the state. Again, this is a statewide training, so we see a lot of representation. I know Spokane is in the building. We have some King County partnerships and some of our colleagues from all the way up north, west in Western Washington. So we hope that you will network and strategize to each other, understand your locale. There might be some similarities if you're in a rural or suburban community, and see what other schools or community service providers are doing in across the state. We hope that you'll learn, you'll be equipped to learning how to create and utilize an eco-mapping and building coalition. This is really important to me, especially in the work. When I used to work in school buildings and school districts, it's really important to know who was in the life of the child that I was working with and their family, and what the relationship was to each component, to the child or to the parent. And so I hope it would be just as a powerful tool to you as it has been for me. We also hope that you'll hear from current and past school district staff on success of school and community partnerships. We do have a training that is kind of part 2 to this, which is going to be the school community partnerships. So you're going to get some of a sneak peek of what that looks like in this training, but we'll dive into it in the following training in May. Before we go into our presentation, do we have any questions or concerns that you may want to ask? Feel free to write in the chat or unmute. We like you to be interactive, so feel free to unmute or just ask questions in the chat box. So we do not intend this to be a lecture. We do want to be involved in conversations. So any questions before we move on? Sure. Oh.
I have a quick question, sorry. I'm curious of the other folks in the room. I don't know if I didn't catch if we did an introduction or anything, but I just wanted to hear, not maybe hear, but like see what other folks in the room, what their roles are in the community. Like me, for example, I am the Youth Advisory Board Chair in Spokane, and so I work with youth and young adults, both in the school system and out, who are facing homelessness. And so I'm just curious what the room looks like, so that we, for better conversation, I guess. I don't know if that's an acceptable question.
Thank you so much, Gage. I own that I forgot to say, please put your name and your role in the chat and where you're joining us from. That's usually part of my intro spiel, and I did not get to it today, so thank you. So we would love if everyone could put their name, your pronouns if you're comfortable, and your role and where you're joining us from today in the chat box so we can kind of see who all is here. Thank you, Gage.
Yeah, that's a great question to ask. Because of such a large group, everyone will get to unmute and say where they're from, but if we can utilize the chat box for that, that'd be great. And in our eco-mapping activity, Gage, we'll be in breakout sessions, and we'll be doing a lot more networking of your service providers, what services you provide, what you do, what region. So you'll have some of that in the breakout group. Granted, it's not the whole group. I think we have, 60 or so in the space at the moment. But it looks like it's showing up in our chat box. So we're seeing, some representation here. Thank you for that, though.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next piece, and I do acknowledge we had a question in the chat before the intros regarding online school, and we're going to parking lot that and maybe follow up in a little bit, but I just want to acknowledge we see that question, so thank you for putting it in the chat. All right, if you've been in a training with me, you know I love Mentometers. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a quick Mentometer. So right now, I'm putting a link in the chat along with everyone's intros, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code at the top of the screen here. And we're just wondering, how familiar are you with McKinney-Vento services? All right. Oh, we got some experts in the room. That's great. I'll give folks a few more minutes to connect into this. Oh, it looks like we got a group that knows what's going on. This is awesome. And a few folks who have heard of it, or maybe are like, wait, what is this term? This is great. This is the beauty of being a statewide training and showing the expertise in the room. And I know that we all have different experiences in the work we do. So glad to have you here.
I'm also wondering if those who are expert are interested in joining us in our next McKinney-Vento deep dive, which is a shameless plug. If you if you're an MKV expert and you would just like to highlight the work that you're doing. Yeah, thanks, Brooke. Great. So she's definitely interested.
Awesome. Taken note. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next slide so we can keep rolling today. And I'm going to pass it off to, looks like we have Samie back. So I'm going to pass it to Samie.
Woo, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and for bearing with me if you happen to have seen any of my snags I was running into this morning with the internet. So what we want to do here is a quick recap of what the McKinney-Vento program is and who it's for. What you're seeing on the slide is in the orange box is going to be really kind of the federal mandate outlined pretty quickly. But to the right side, what we want to really show here is what this actually looks like in your communities. So we know what we read in the law is both very straightforward, but also really produces a lot of gray area. So what we want you to think about today when we think about McKinney-Vento is that these programs are built to meet the needs for their districts and their unique communities. So it's really not going to look the same across communities the way McKinney-Vento works always. The work is dynamic, it's unpredictable, it requires a huge range of skills. I know we have a lot of people in the audience today from housing nonprofits and community-based organizations, so I know you know this game. We know it takes a whole community and a village to serve the student population. The staffing doesn't always match up with the need. So there are things that happen in terms of McKinney-Vento programming where you just don't have the capacity to maybe stretch as far as you would like or to get to every single student in that way that you wish you could. To add to that, not to bring everybody down, but we also know this is a very underfunded mandate. And we're going to go to the next slide, please. Again, in the law, the McKinney-Vento Act defines homeless children as individuals who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. When you think of McKinney-Vento, those three pieces are really important to drive home. So when a student is being reviewed to see if they're eligible for this program, we want to think about, is their situation housing wise, is it fixed, being like permanent, not subject to change anytime soon? Is it regular? So can the student predict where they're going to be able to stay on a consistent basis? And then is it adequate, sufficient for meeting both physical and psychological needs, typically met in home environments? And then, so as you think about this today, just keep those pieces in mind if you ever are wondering, what does it mean to be a McKinney-Vento? Those are really great places to start, at least from the school district perspective. And we also want to think about how to help the students and families you're serving to meet these eligibility requirements so they can be identified to access resources through McKinney-Vento. We know that the need is high and the numbers we are seeing are lower than what they really are in reality. So we know there's more work to be done with identification. And we also know qualifying students for this program really takes the whole community. So say you have a really close relationship with your district or school right now, or say you don't. Having this information will help you get the students and families you serve to the right person in the district or school so that they can be qualified for these services. And then also just a reminder, documentation should never be a barrier to accessing McKinney-Vento services. So we wanted to make sure that that was mentioned today. And next slide, please. And then again, just this is very condensed, but these are some key pieces to McKinney-Vento. We want to think about school access. We want to think about stability, support for academic success. We want it to be student-centered or child-centered when we're making those best interest decision-making, which we're not going to go deep into today or at this moment, but that's something that's definitely a key piece of McKinney-Vento. There's a huge critical role for our McKinney-Vento liaisons. Every district across Washington has to choose a McKinney-Vento liaison that represents their community every year. That role could look very, very different depending on how the community decides to build that role out. And then those partnerships and collaborations across systems. So what we know, as we've already talked about with it, just taking your community in a village, we know that being connected to those local resources is really important. And then again, on the right side, we're just referencing again that we know that every building, so every district has its own culture, and every building within that district and school also have their own culture. So this is just going to be another way to show that McKinney-Vento, even though it is backed by law, is going to show up differently. The needs of McKinney-Vento students are also going to be equally unique, which oftentimes requires, a high level of creativity to be able to meet those needs. And again, capacity and role limitations are real, and we know that these resources can be limited. And then the next slide, I'm going to hand it off to Kayla.
Thanks, Samie. So similar to what Samie was saying as far as McKinney-Vento being underfunded, even though every district has a McKinney-Vento liaison, sometimes they share that role and another role. And so I saw in the chat, it looks like April from Lake Quinault is both the McKinney-Vento liaison and an administrative secretary. So depending on the district and the size of the district, they might hold multiple hats, as I'm sure we all do in this work, but to just keep that in mind that but their main role is to ensure that students experiencing homelessness have access to their education and are doing outreach to schools to understand that, for schools to understand how to identify and to support students experiencing homelessness. And then every school building should have a building point of contact. And that is really to protect the confidentiality of students so that not every teacher or staff member knows or is talking about, oh, so-and-so lives in a shelter. This is supposed to be a confidential, just one person that can communicate with the McKinney-Vento liaison to ensure that that student is being supported in their education. And so unaccompanied youth also qualify for McKinney-Vento, and I would say are pretty under-supported, and that would mean that they are not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. So most of the unaccompanied youth that I worked with, either their parents were deported or their parents were unable to care for them, but they kind of slipped through the cracks of they weren't in the foster care system and didn't have a formal custody arrangement with an adult. And so they would either be couch surfing with friends or sleeping in warehouses, sleeping in tent cities, runaway youth. So it's really important to do outreach to schools and to students so they understand that they would qualify for these services, which would include that the unaccompanied youth could seek enrollment at the school that was presumed to be in their best interest. As we were talking about, this is student-centered. The student would know best where would be best for them to go. And this has come up recently with the COVID vaccines and everything, but the McKinney-Vento liaisons can sign off for medical consent for unaccompanied youth so that they can still access medical treatment along with their educational access.
Right to immediate enrollment. Now, immediate enrollment looks different for the different school districts, depending on their capacity and the right placement that is going to make sure the student is thriving. So the enrollment includes attending class and participating fully in any school and activities. So the school district should be receiving all of the previous records, immunization, whatever is provided by the following school district. If the student and the family does not have that, that should not minimize or delay the right to immediate enrollment. There are some things to consider that may slow down the process of immediate enrollment, ensuring it's the right placement. We're going to talk about a lot of different programs that students qualify for. So is there a 504 plan? Is there an IEP? Have they been connected to the special education department? What's the capacity of the special education department? What are the transportation resources needed? And usually sometimes the 504 plan kicks in there too. Is it the right bus? Is it the right size? So there's a lot of things to consider when we're enrolling a student into the school. The McKinney-Vento, like I said, does not define immediate, but its standard definition is without delay. So in a perfect world, we would love to have a student in within 48 hours of them enrolling and registering for school. But due to capacity and making sure, again, it's the right placement for that child, so we're not seeing too much transitioning happening in that first month or two, We just make sure that everyone who's involved in that child's educational environment is aware of receiving them and is aware that, some of the situations that they're going to, a lot of that information is confidential. So we don't, typically share that with the receiving school or people in the school buildings, but just in case there are programs that they identify for, like I said, special education, IEP, ELL, English language learners, they would be informed that they're arriving. There's also tests and things that go with that. So like I said, we would love to have them in 48 hours, but generally it takes a little longer to make sure all those pieces are at play. Next slide. Connecting students and families to homeless services. So typically, when we want to identify a family in McKinney-Vento, there's a housing questionnaire form that they receive. Generally, we do not ask their housing situation, but the family or the service provider, if you're a service provider, you're familiar with the housing questionnaire form, especially during the enrollment process, gets filled out, and that's usually how we identify the student in their student profile in ways for the school year. And it's on a rolling basis, so it really doesn't matter whenever we're enrolling the kid. The purpose is to have a student housing questionnaire form. The family could refuse to fill out the student housing questionnaire form. That doesn't mean that we would deny them services, but we would love if that form was filled out. The MKV staff or the building point of contact, someone that they trust at the school building will do the eligibility intake. During that process, we talk about resources that are potentially available at the school level and at the district level. Sometimes with that enrollment, a family will share that they're in the season of a sport, like they play a sport or they're in band, they're a part of a club, and they would like to keep that continuity at this new building or this new school. So we make sure that they are enrolled in that process without delay. Usually once they're identified, the deadlines that a lot of those programs have should not be creating barriers for the student to participate. Like I said, they're enrolling on a rolling basis. So if the student enters in November or even September, and the deadline for a program and activity was the prior year, we would ensure that they can still get a slot or see what possibility of engagement is available for that student. Identification, like I said, enrollment, transportation is put together. As a lot of you guys have known, in the last several years, transportation has been an issue. We have staffing issues, availability. We've had to cut certain trips and routes due to shortage of bus drivers. But our goal is to ensure proper transportation is put together, be engaged and be in conversation with the transportation department. We understand frustrations with that. I know a lot of service providers do not have a direct line to transportation. So you're kind of doing a messenger in middle, going through a middle person to make sure that transportation is set up for the student. Next slide. Navigating schools. As a community-based organization, it's a hands-on approach. We are involved in the scholar's life. So we are in this ecosystem. So it's really important that your involvement is proactive when it comes to advocating for the youth. Being that voice, making sure those services that they should be receiving is there. Do they feel successful and safe at school? Education is their civil right. And we need to make sure that at the end of the day, are they receiving adequate education services? Leverage the resources available to your organizations to build a team of support for youth and their families. Today, we're going to talk about an ecosystem, and that might be a tool to leverage the resources available to you and your community, as well as knowing if you're assigned to a school or if you're an after-school provider in the building, leveraging of who all is in the community and how can I tap into those resources to advocate for the child. Maintain open lines of communication with educators and supporters of your clients. We know, all of us here know how the education system has gone in the last, again, couple of years, and how can we be a support system to our teachers in our school buildings? How can we show up as a partner? And so having that open line of communication of just saying as a partner, I'm here for you, I'm there, is really important. And so removing, pointing fingers and the blame and not going back to the way education system used to be and moving towards a more cohesive model is our plan through this training. Next slide. So the disclaimer, before I get onto this list is a list that is very short, but does not include all the important people that is in the school building. We know that there are some people that are left out that are equally, even more, in my experience, important. So because you don't see those titles or those positions on this list does not mean that we weren't considering them. The important was generally this list of people are who sits on a student improvement team, who may be a part of a multi-tier system of the support, usually engage more in a child's well-being, in their profile, in their school day. So, you know, we are giving a special shout out to the school nurses, cafeteria, our bus drivers, and our janitorial teams in our school building. So there's a lot of people we missed out. If we had a 4 or 5 hour training, we would have several slides identifying why everybody's role is important in students, especially students experiencing homelessness, especially from our experiences. So we do want to highlight that there are some people missing, but that doesn't mean they're not as important. We want to give them a shout out. So school principals, everyone knows their role, school counselors. We're the whole point is highlighting these titles because they're in a school building, and they are part of the child's, again, like I said, a multi-tiered system. Some are caveat. You may have the best relationship with the school counselor at one school, knowing that they're not there for the summer. The goal is to be involved in knowing who the summer counselor will be if your client or student will be attending summer school or being referred to a summer program. And so although that counselor that you're familiar with isn't there during the school year, that doesn't mean these roles drop off during the summer. Usually there is someone in this position or title that is working in a summer school or a summer enrichment program and providing somewhat services to our homeless youth. Next slide. All right, so these roles are really important because when we're talking about immediate enrollment and placement of a student, sometimes we don't understand the extra supports that they need. And these are some really important positions that rover from building to building. They're really important, and I wish we can have them in school buildings all the time. FTE, physical therapists and occupational therapists, speech and language pathologists, and school psychologists is very important, but oftentimes they're not there, but they are connected to services. So if you feel like a client is not receiving services and they should, you do have the ability to ask for that recommendation and a referral. You can't always connect directly with them unless the family gives you rights to that student access, but generally I'm sure your agency would advise against that. But I do want to share that these are the special roles that are available in the students. Again, a student daily. Excuse me. All right, we're going to go to the next slide. All right, these are overall, again, still a lot that are missing, programs that are available within the K-12 resources programs. Some of these services are offered at the early learning, so your ECAP Head Start, if they're at a publicly funded school or school building, so they're not always available at the private or independent ones. I'm going to talk really briefly about some of those acronyms. We do have a part 2 where we're going to talk about special populations in our training later down the road in May. So we're going to do a deeper dive in how students experiencing homelessness have access to these resources and ways that we can connect them and provide them with resources. So special education, often referred to SPED. This is generally one that a lot of people are familiar with, but just in case you're not, special education is specifically designed instruction that addresses the unique needs of student eligible to receive special education services. Again, there are civil rights within this program, and so there's an IEP attached, and we need to ensure that the things addressed in their IEP, their needs are being met, especially for our students who are experiencing homelessness in their enrollment process. Sometimes that is missed. There's a section 504. This requires public schools to provide a free appropriate public education, also known as an FAPE, to every student with a disability, regardless of the nature and severity of the disability. Under section 504, schools must provide students with disability accommodation aids and services they need access to. And the reason why I'm sharing this information with you is oftentimes when we're doing the immediate enrollment, we may not have all this information until that paperwork is provided to the school district or the school building. And so if you are the service provider and you're familiar with some of this disability or equipment or tools that are needed for the child, feel free to be the champion and advocate for those needs as we wait for those papers, because we can get that process started until we get the official documentation. The career and technical education, a lot of people are not familiar with this program, but it promotes and supports locally based middle school and high school programs that provide 21st century academic and technical skills for all students. Again, that's for all students. So our students experiencing homelessness should have an open enrollment to have access to those resources. So they do a lot of partial credit programs. They have programs around mechanical engineers, nursing, horticulture. It's a variety depending on your school district and your area and region. So it's really important to get connected to that. I guess also thinking about partial credit and ways that they can receive that pathway to that high school and beyond pathway. Not exactly saying they'll know what they want, but at least they'll guide them in a certain direction. There is a high school and beyond plan. Students work with school counselors and advisors to create their own individual plan. The personalized plan throughout high school and revises the plan annually to accommodate changes, interests, and post-secondary goals. In a perfect world, this should go hand in hand with the career and technical education program. The Learning Assistance Program, which is referred to LAP. Again, in education, we love to use acronyms, but understand that a lot of people do not know what those acronyms stand for. So the Learning Assistant Program provides supplemental instruction and services to students who are not meeting academic standards and basic skills in areas such as reading, writing, and mathematics, as well as readiness associated with these skills. Another one is Title I, Part A, which is a federal program designed to provide all students significant opportunities to receive a fair, equitable, and high quality education to close educational achievement gap. And as a service provider, you're probably wondering, why is this important to me? Well, if you're providing services to a school who's been identified as Title I, chances are there's funding and opportunities to do supplemental assistance activities for school and community engagement. So really, the school should have funding to do a holistic partnership with community organizations, and it can be through open house, it can be culturally responsive, events and partnerships. It should look and feel like it's very catered and student-centered to that population, because that's what they're receiving the Title I funds for. Youth Ascend, which is a project of building changes. My colleague Samie, Iverson, Mandy, worked on this. It is a youth-centered online tool for providers working with young people experiencing homelessness and housing instability as they plan for life after high school. It offers inclusive and collaborative space where young people can explore resources to support their stability and opportunities you might want to pursue post-graduation. So that's just a shameless plug on our Youth Ascend Washington. Again, that's Mandy Parks, and Samie Iverson. So shameless plug on our project. Next slide. Advocacy and Power Partnership, and that's you. If you're wondering it's you that's in the room. It's you that's looking at the screen. Parents, family, and community, that advocacy, raising our voices, it really starts with us. At the school level, we have our teachers, counselors, school support staff, and principals. From there, if you feel like you're hitting a wall and you're not getting the services that your student, your client, your family needs, that's where the district level supports come in. That's when you reach out to maybe the director of special education, the manager of ELL. It may be seeing what the enrollment process looks like at the district level. It may be kicking it up to the superintendent and showing up at the school board meetings and saying, I don't feel like our clients are meeting or are receiving the needs in order for them to come to school and stay in school, because that's really important. Not only do we want them to come to school, we want them to stay in school and feel like they're receiving the services that they need. Again, education is civil right. And do we feel like they're receiving that? And what can we do if they're not? And if they are, how can we be a positive partnership in this ecosystem for this child to ensure that continuity and that flow is happening? Next slide. Now we're going to go to our speaker series. I'm going to kick it to my colleague, Joey.
Thank you. So before I pivot to our great speaker in the room, I just want to highlight a few conversations that have happened in the chat. So there was a conversation around ECAP and how that early education piece is students may qualify for McKinney-Vento under ECAP, but it's not guaranteed that the transportation and services will be prioritized. So you can see a few more resources in there that Kayla provided. And we're also having a conversation about kind of Title I. So I just want to direct attention there. And from here, I'm going to pivot to our awesome speaker of the day, or one of our speakers of today. We have Rose Spadell, who works as the Senior Education Ombuds, or as a Senior Education Ombuds with the Office of the Education Ombuds, so OEO. Rose joined OEO in 2012, drawn by the collaborative nature of the work, bringing together families and schools in support of students. In her role at OEO, Rose works directly with families, educators, community professionals, and other government agencies to find solutions to support students. And with that, I'll hand it over to Rose.
Thanks so much, Joy. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad to be here. When you did your poll, I did not claim expertise because I feel like I'm a continuous learner on McKinney-Vento and all else around schools. Whenever I start to feel like I've got it under my belt, something changes. And so that's part of what our office is here to do, is to help families navigating our public school systems, really with a focus on students. And our office strategic plan and mission and focus really zeroes in on trying to make sure that students who have been in those gaps and left out have access to school. So trying to focus on racial equity, disability justice, making sure that all kids have access. Do you mind switching to the next slide? And also, I have to say thank you. Today, one of my colleagues is here, another Senior Education Ombuds, Danielle Eidenberg-Napi, and she has been with OEO even longer than I have. So if I miss anything, she can add to the presentation. But OEO, it's a small state agency. It was created by our state legislature way back in 2006, and it is situated under the umbrella of the governor's office. So it makes us independent from school districts and ESDs and separate from OSPI. We end up doing a lot of collaborative work across those lines, but we are a small agency under the governor's office. Created to help share information about the public schools, help families and students understand what their rights are within that and what the expectations are of them, and to do some informal problem solving when issues come up. And you can see our mission. We work with families, communities, and schools to address problems together so every student can fully participate and thrive. So next slide, please. Yeah, and this slide is a little outdated, and I'm very happy to say in this legislative session, we got a little bump, so we're going to be able to add to our team. We currently are a team of 8, and we do our work in what we think of as 3 buckets. We do that individual support with information and informal conflict resolution. So we're here as an informational resource, problem solving or conflict resolution. And then we also get to do policy work on issues that are affecting students in state public schools. All of our resources are free. We are a confidential resource, so families, teachers, community members can call us and have a conversation, and that will stay with us unless we specifically get permission, and we require written permission from families before we would reach out and talk to someone about the situation, if that's going to be helpful. And next slide, if you will. And this, I mentioned briefly, is our current strategic plan. We went through a really great process bringing in voices from community, looking at how can we make a meaningful impact when we're a small agency working statewide, and we know we have a large public school system, and we do the different kinds of work, community outreach, trainings, workshops, we develop informational materials, we do that one-on-one support in individual cases, we sit on policy work groups and task forces. how can we do that and make a meaningful impact? And so our current strategic plan really focuses us in on education justice, racial justice, and disability justice, especially for communities most affected by COVID-19. And we have an intake process, intake line. People can either call us, they can email us, they can contact us online, and we try to provide helpful information, resources, and referrals for anyone who calls with a question about our public schools. When someone calls and they have a question or a concern about a student who's out of school, or a student of color, Black or Indigenous, or experiencing homelessness, or in foster care, involved with juvenile justice, immigrant or refugee, or receiving WISE services, those are the times when we can dig in a little bit more deeply and spend some time as one of the senior ombuds trying to sort through the situation. Next slide. I mentioned we put out informational resources. They're sort of always a work in progress. Over the years, we've had some really big parent guides to special education, parent guides to student discipline, parent guides to education advocacy. And wouldn't you know it, over the years, the rules change around discipline. We get updates on special ed. But so we've been trying to keep updated, useful information available on our website. And this shows you one example of one of our education issues tabs, where we have some information about state school discipline rules and regulations. And it includes some ideas and tips around advocating and reminders, right? So discipline key reminders are that in recent years, we've had some changes that say a student might get into trouble, they might engage in behavior that's not appropriate for school, and they might receive discipline, but we will not discipline them by taking away all access to education. So even when students are suspended or expelled now in our state, they all have a right to continue to access education in some form. So that's an example. And we also have different publications and webinars on our website. The next slide, please. So what do people call us about? Over the years, it shifts here and there. We very regularly and frequently get calls, people trying to sort through questions or concerns around adequate supports, evaluation, other kind of thing for students who have disabilities and either already have an IEP, so an individualized education plan, or someone suspects maybe they need that additional support. Mehret mentioned the special education or 504 plans. And I'm sure many of you know that there's specific steps and process to go through, first to see if an evaluation can be done, and then to see if they're eligible. And then it's a continuing work in progress when you've got that, because you're annually at least reviewing that. So we do get a lot of calls about students with disability. Last year it was quieter on school discipline, but this year it has definitely ticked back up in terms of questions around what are options, ideas, rights, processes if we do have a situation where a student gets into trouble and is suspended or removed from class. This year and this morning, we were just sharing that we definitely have also seen an uptick in questions and concerns around harassment and bullying, and some of it getting to pretty high levels of conflict this year. And it's certainly, some of those situations can be very sticky and hard to resolve. One of the things is that every school district has to have a policy and procedure for addressing harassment and bullying. And so a lot of times a family will call us and we'll start by making sure they're familiar with their school district's policy and procedure, that they have access to their district's own incident reporting form to make sure that it gets reported kind of formally and draws that investigation that sometimes is really needed to look at the whole context and respond. So harassment and bullying, enrollment and transportation, and this very much definitely comes up around kids who are McKinney-Vento eligible or have a question about it, or kids who are in foster care. Also for students who are not, but, or maybe you haven't yet been identified, and we just try to troubleshoot and see how to support, making sure, again, our focus is on how do we make sure each kid is getting access to education. So there might be different things that are questions coming up or barriers in the way, and we're trying to navigate to where each student has access to learning. Attendance definitely comes up, where the attendance kind of questions are different this year. We had another big change in our state law, and that was around the Becca bill and attendance, with last year being the end of the use of juvenile detention in truancy cases where kids miss school and continue to miss school. It used to be that then they could be given time in juvenile detention. And that piece was removed, so that we said we're going to use other strategies to try to support students to get back to school and stay in school if they're truant. And so courts are shifting, school districts are shifting, communities are trying to figure out what does that look like to support kids getting back to school as the dynamic and role of the court shifts. And so we've gotten calls, unfortunately, students who got disconnected, a lot of them during COVID, and I'm sure you guys are seeing this, that sometimes that route back is not simple or easy, and there are a lot of bumps in the way. So trying to figure out how do we get supports there that make a difference. And then language access. So we share information with families about their rights to receive interpretation and translated documents. We also very fortunately have quick, ready access to an interpreter phone line with, I think it's now over 200 or 300 languages. Within our office, we have capacity to work directly with families in Spanish and Tigrinya, and then we use that language line pretty regularly. So next slide. And just real quick, if you were, any of you, if you ever had a question, you just want to kind of bounce ideas off, you're very welcome to get in touch. That's part of what we do, just that sounding board, kind of talking through what might be possible here. Can we look for some information? Where did you see that? Did you have any guidance on that? When families or community people call us, you can call, and thank you, Joey, for putting the number in the chat. You can call, you can email, you can go online. We take a little bit of information, check to see if you're calling about an issue in we call it K-12 public schools. So we sometimes do get calls about kids in preschool, and especially if they're on kind of the cusp of going into kindergarten, we can try to help. Generally, we start at kindergarten. We say K-12, but we go all the way through until a student graduates or finishes, including if they're going to do a transition program, like from 18 to 21, if they're receiving special ed services, or if they're not, and they just haven't graduated yet, and they need to find a public school opportunity to finish that process. Public schools do include all the public schools. They include charter schools, state tribal compact schools, online schools, and some students who are placed in specialized schools through their district who have received special ed. Try to give some information. If it's one of our strategic plan issues, we work for we can take some more time, really listen to what's going on, work with a family for about 120 days, trying to be helpful then. If a family gives us written permission, we can reach out to schools directly. So there might be some of you that I've had a chance to talk with, or my colleagues have. And when we do that, connecting with schools or districts, we are really trying to make those connections, again, to try to see how do we find that path towards resolution for a student. And resolution looks differently. Sometimes in the course of that, and now as everybody's on, used to these video conferencing, we're actually able to attend more meetings through video conference we used to do by phone. One little note there, those are the things we do. Our office was created, it was the very first ever ombudsman's office for public education in K-12. And it was a new kind of role. And there's a sort of question like, now, where does this fit within our system? Because we know we have OSPI, which is our state education agency, which has some oversight and responsibilities in some very specific areas. Our office, very specifically was designed as an informal ombuds office. So we don't have enforcement authority, and we don't formally represent or advocate for families in those formal processes. We definitely try to make sure we share information about those options and where are those times where within a district or up to OSPI or otherwise, there's a process for formal dispute resolution. So that's one piece of it. And next. And here is how you can get in touch with us: phone, online, by email. Our online intake, we actually have available in multiple languages now. So if you're working with a family and they want to navigate that in their primary language. And next one. And we are on Facebook, so you can find information there. So I just talked kind of fast for a long time. Thank you for your patience and bearing with. Any questions? I could also throw it over to my colleague Danielle if there's any highlights that I missed and you'd want to share with folks.
Oh, thank you, Rose. Here, let me see. There we are. I'm just so glad that Rose got to share today, and I always look to Rose for a lot of our updated information because I'm here to learn today along with everyone. And I guess I just wanted to reiterate something that Rose shared, which is that we can work with anyone. A service provider can contact us and actually, on behalf of a family, open a case with us that we can serve in a kind of consultation role, unless the family signs permission, gives us permission to work with the school or district. But we really are in a position to facilitate communication between families and educators on behalf of students. And so we're trying to connect families with the providers in their buildings, in their schools, in their districts, and in the community who can help support them when we leave the process, when we stop working with the family. And so I'm just happy to learn more today and to be here. Thank you, Rose.
Yeah, thank you. And I meant to emphasize, you know, when we're working with children and youth who are highly mobile in families, it really can get complicated, especially if it is a child with a disability and they've had plans developed or evaluations or placements and stuff, and kind of keeping track of all that as they cross from one school or to another, one district to another. One of the things that I hope will be helpful to any of you and to families is that because we're statewide, we can try to help put those connections together wherever, whatever town or district or school a family's in. So we're able to kind of try to help draw those connections, much as I'm sure many of you do.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Rose and Danielle, for that perspective. Thank you guys for being here and constantly being an advocate for our students and families. I do recommend, if you are working with a family that is just hitting the wall with their school or school district, or just wanting to get consultation on a matter, you reach out to them. So here's their information, and yeah, save them in your Rolodex as you see fit. That is our state level, highlighting our resources at a state level. Now we're going to move on to resources at a regional level. And our partners at Puget Sound ESD 121, as we kind of switch out, because they'll be sharing their slides, we're just going to talk about at ESD, our Washington Educational Service District. We have 9. Today we'll be hearing from ESD 121, also referred to as the Puget Sound ESD, so you probably have heard that reference. Education service districts were established at the state level as a vehicle to link public schools with state and national education resources. Today we have 2 friends from Puget Sound Education Service District 121, which is one of the 9 and very large regional education agencies serving school districts, tribal schools, and state-approved charter and private schools. Education service districts, again, like I said, was created at the legislation level. And it is essentially a regional delivery model for early learning, kindergarten, post-secondary services in the state. And today we'll have Brad Brown, the Executive Director of Learning, Teaching, and Leadership Development, and Adam Kay, Director of Collaborative Systems and Improvement Project. Thanks for being here, Brad and Adam.
Thank you so much for having us, Mehret. It's wonderful to be here. Brad, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Please bear with me because I just got, of course, now that I'm talking, it says your internet connection is unstable. So if someone waves to me, I'll know to pass it to Adam abruptly. Adam?
All right. So I'm Adam Kay, Director of Collaborative Improvement Networks, and we really want to share with you today one of the initiatives that we've put together over the last couple of years, which is the Transformational Collaborative, or the Puget Sound Transformational Collaborative. Lots of acronyms over in our world too. We'll do our best to unpack those and not use those acronyms wherever possible. But before we jump into that, Brad's going to give a little overview about us as an ESD and specifically our role as Puget Sound ESD Educational Services District. You with us, Brad?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mehret and I'm sorry?
You're good.
Okay. First, I'd like to thank Mehret and team for inviting us to share. And again, I appreciate the conversation around target universalism, being very specific around the students furthest away from educational justice and leaning into that space, understanding that we all benefit when we support those students. And so I have a chart before you, and when we think about, and I'll just say where a lot of our current educational service districts are, that's the list on the left, and we all kind of do that. What has made ESD 121 different and somewhat unique is its journey intentionally and its commitment to anti-racist multicultural organization. That's what we're looking to become. And its commitment in fostering the relationships that are necessary through our nation's Black, Indigenous, people of color, youth and families. And we're looking to eliminate those gaps and hone in that support and looking at, doing more about not just racially just, but looking at that from a humanistic standpoint. And I think Mehret said this earlier, really looking at what's possible as opposed to blame, but understand we all have a responsibility in this work. And just a quick data point about our ESD. We're one of 9, like she shared, but we represent 40% of the student population. And within King and Pierce County, that's about 206 languages. And so we like to lean into that, that opportunity to learn more and learn better as we improve systems. Okay, Adam.
Excellent. So I've been with the ESD since March of 2020. Perfect timing. Really wonderful to roll in at that point, and been working for the wonderful Brad Brown. And right after the pandemic started, we had a request from our superintendents to convene a space of collaborative leaders in the region to ensure that we would not go back to normal after the pandemic. I don't think anyone realized that we would be in this pandemic space for as long as we have been, but there was a real emphasis to ensure that our priorities and leading with racial equity were still front and center in all of the work that we did. And so, yeah, Brad, if you want to speak a little bit about the RMIC, the Roadmap Improvement Collaborative, and the superintendent requests that kind of came out there.
Yeah, so how do we come about Well, we initially started doing some collaborative work with what we consider kind of the roadmap districts, which is 7 of our central districts, if you will, located in King County area. And when the pandemic hit, we found all of our systems struggling to connect, communicate, and build a level of coherence. And whenever one decision is made, it's a ripple effect for another school system. And so the superintendents came together and says, hey, ESD, can you help convene us and some of our leaders so that we can spend more time, whether it's implementing and maximize our learning and sharing of resources. And that's where the Puget Sound Transformation Collaborative came in. And seeing that Adam was already doing that work in regards to with 7 districts, I coupled him with our RID director, which is Resource Innovation and Data, so that we can do some of that collaboration and then start to bring in partners. So we brought in middle level leaders, i.e. that would be like assistant deputy superintendents, et cetera, and superintendents themselves, and then begin to grow beyond that. And so Adam can speak a little bit more to that work.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the beginning, we had about 30 to 40 participants in this collaborative. And what was unique about it from an educational service district perspective was that the collaborative was made up of transformational partners across our regional landscape. So we had community-based organizational leaders join us, which is how we came to connect with Building Changes and Mehret. We had ESD staff, so our directors that were involved in different strands of the work. We had parent and youth representatives, so we built a what we're calling a representative advisory council that is led by parent and community leaders that really helps design, and to this day is integral in the design and functioning of the space. And then we had our district and building leaders. And our first few weeks, as you might imagine, I think the topic for today is navigating our school systems. And there was lots of language, lots of relational challenges in really supporting these very different but focused and aligned in shared purpose leaders come together in a way that could really anchor and direct that work. And so over we've been going now for 2 years. We started off meeting weekly and now meet every other week for a couple of hours and bring together problems of practice that are really integral to these stakeholder groups and raise them up and work together on collaborative solutions. And as you'll see here, jumped a bit ahead here. We've kind of shifted in our dynamics over time. So our first phase, we really spent a lot of time relationship building, building our foundations for what we're about, what is the shared purpose, and identifying shared opportunity areas that we could all dive into. And we'll go into those opportunity areas in a second. In our second phase, we wanted to get deeper into the work. So we'd formed a set of relationships, we'd identified shared priorities, and we wanted to really recognize what is the collective wisdom in our space for lifting up those shared priorities, as well as the regional wisdom that existed in each of these areas of community school partnerships, of elevating youth and community-based organization voice, of racial equity policies and procedures, and of supporting our educators of color during this time. And so at the end of our second phase, we emerged with a playbook that really was kind of like our charter, right? Like what would guide us going forward. And so as we entered our third phase, we decided, let's open it up. We'll invite district teams that are cross-tier district systemic leaders to join with a focus on one of our playbook priorities, something that was aligned with a playbook goal, which was actually really easy. We had 4 teams jump in this past year to jump in with problems of practice anchored around our four external goals. Brad, before I go into these two, is there anything you wanted to add here about the dynamic of the group. All right, I'll go on. I think Brad's having some.
I just want to add one thing.
Yeah,
as we talk about systems, it's really important. Am I good?
We hear you. Sounds like there's a bit of a delay, Brad. But otherwise, you're good.
Important as we talk about transforming, that we involve the people who are mostly impacted by it, and also think about the piece of representation matters. It is absolutely imperative that we kind of hold this little mantra of nothing for us without us. But they definitely should have influence on the decisions and the directions in creating those things.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. And that leads into really one of the main functions of the collaborative, which we identified really quickly as a collaborative space. Most often our collaboratives, and particularly our ESD work, is external facing, is how can we support districts? What can we do to improve policies, practices, procedures? We take less time really reflecting on our own behaviors, on our own ways of showing up, and our own ways of relating with each other. And I think the unique dynamic of this space really brought those challenges and opportunities to light from the beginning. And so one of our first main functions was really transform ourselves to transform our systems. So how could we identify the traditional institutional ways that we typically show up in meeting spaces, in convening spaces, in problem solving, that really reflect the status quo, and knowing that in order to disrupt the status quo, we not only need to do different, but we need to be and think differently as well. And so we spent a lot of time and continue to spend a lot of time on something the agency has developed called the Transformational Relationship and Partnership Framework, which really builds on this idea of white supremacy culture characteristics and identifying those and moving towards really transformational ways of being and showing up in our work. And so that underlies pretty much every meeting we have, and opportunities to reflect and relate with each other. And at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we have these 4 priorities that we dig into that are really these shared system drivers that were identified by all of our partners that were essentially opportunities that were lifted up by our partner groups: racial equity policy and practice connections, support for educators of color, family school partnerships, and youth leadership and community-based organization partnerships. And so our external work in that group has been organized around those themes. Brad?
And so, with barring any internet, I'm sorry, I'm a little jumbled there. So we were looking for successes thus far, and I'll say this: when you're working with different groups, and I don't mean to talk to you in that way, but I can't say enough and stress enough, the litmus test is, do those people trust you? Period. You're going to have to spend time in building those relationships. And our system doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. It loves rules, policies, and regulations. And there's plenty of data, whether it's police data, et cetera, in terms of why and how people access certain things that need it and they don't, healthcare, et cetera. There's this gap of trust. And so that is why at the top of this list, trusting relationships are there. You want people not only to come for help with you, is when you also go out, you want them to be open to receive it. So it doesn't matter how good the lasagna is. If they don't trust you, they're not going to eat it. And so you have to hold that. And I can't stress that enough. Sessions were co-designed by parents and ESD leaders. Again, nothing for us without us. And then cross-system connections. We also have systems within ESD as well. And we had to think differently about that, working with our racial equity group, thinking about what that looks like for teachers of color, et cetera. And then Adam just put in the chat, creating guiding documents and resources, having something to reflect on is essential. And then feedback loops. How does that help us continue to improve? Adam showed you the timeline of, well, here's where we started, middle level leaders, and then we grew to CEOs, grew to parents. And we've also added youth. Like it's a continuum of growth. And we've also been warm demanders of saying, this is the structures that should be in place for more of our K-12 partners that are looking to grow and do better and closing some of those gaps, and supporting all of those students, be it special ed, McKinney-Vento. But these systems help improve that work and improve better outcomes, and helping students not just graduate, but also find meaningful ways of living and support their families. Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think one of the major takeaways for me is that this space has really begun to address at the ESD specifically, as well as with our districts and school buildings, a breaking down of traditional silos that often happen. And what it opens up for us is the messy hard work of collaborating across sectors, across perspectives and stakeholders, and really raises the opportunity to identify the humanity in each of our roles and again, our shared purpose in that space. So a couple really powerful sentiments from our folks in the space. It's given me the courage and also the tools and approaches to continue to move the work forward, which we have done in my district, and much more to come. And then seeing the power of our community members sharing their wisdom, and how our district folks are so willing to learn from and with parents and community. And it's just a beginning. There's tremendous learning that's happening. And I think one of the ethics that's really pervading this space is a sense of humility and a learning orientation to get better together. And rather than read out these other two, I wonder, we want to make sure there's time for some questions and answers, but wanted to take a moment to maybe put Mehret on the spot a little bit as she's represented building changes in this space now for a while, and wanted to hear a little bit about her experience in this space and how it really kind of connects to the community school partnership focus of these sessions.
Oh, thank you, Adam. It has been a tremendous experience. The most powerful portion of it is seeing parents involved in that conversation. Brad keeps highlighting, they'll talk about us with us, and seeing parents engage in leading activities and being a part of the change or the systems change, because who's also present are superintendents and staff, and some staff who are school board directors in other school districts. So everyone is connected, believe it or not. And so it's been pretty powerful. For us, when I attend, it's really advocating and highlighting the needs of students experiencing homelessness on a statewide level. So it's really nice to hear what's happening at the regional, local level, but also amplifying, don't forget about this population, and bringing it to the forefront to the people who are in the room that typically aren't connecting to that population, or that staff that supports that population. So it's great. It's a playbook that I think others can adopt. I think I saw, Adam, you had dropped in the chat box. So take a look at it. If you're a region that wants to create like a service provider, a round table, the playbook is there, but reach out to Adam and Brad and see how you could probably adopt a similar model if you want to lead with that work. I did want to go back to a question that was asked about Title I funds. I don't know if the person who had asked, because I want to give you the opportunity to ask this, because I think it's really important. I think, Samita, are you still on the call? It was around Title I dollars and how students qualify. Peggy answered this question, but Brad, as a former principal, school leader, the importance of school community partnerships and Title I funds, and why you think external partners should understand when they're working with a Title I school. I brought it up as a funding and partnership opportunities, but from your experience being a school leader, do you mind talking a little bit about Title I and that role?
Can everyone hear me? Yep, perfect. Again, apologize about this. I can't say enough about Title I dollars and what they can do, because, you know, just like COVID, you know, teachers are always taxed, et cetera, just from the day to day, but we would use our Title I dollars to do the things like that are happening today, right? Like not just getting the email about McKinney-Vento, but bringing together focus groups and being able to support teachers that have a specific skill set. And I'll say this too. I mean, as we look at this system today, I put a question in the chat, who is at the table? Title I dollars can help support you having folks at the table, right? That are better representatives of the students in which you're trying to support. We would spend our Title I dollars to help foster intentional gatherings. And again, if you want things to do different, you can't do the same things. You can't have the same planned teacher conferences. You can't have the same, like there has to be that. I mean, that's what the Title I dollars are for. And so the unfortunate thing is our system tends to stay in that. And that's why, again, I'm going to go back and I'll just continue to beat that drum, is you have to have the folks at the table. For example, our Title I dollars supported us when I was working on the east side of Tacoma to help support and bring staff in to have PTA in the middle of the day. Why? Because our Latinx parents, that some were undocumented, some were, it was the best time to have them. And again, Adam knows this story all too well. 26 people showed up for our first Latinx PTA. And again, we use Title I dollars to help pay for our parent-teacher liaison as well, that could support with the language. So I can't say enough in terms of, if used properly, it can be an absolute game changer for your school and for those students. I hope that answers the question.
All right. Thank you, Adam and Brad, so much for joining us today. I am curious, if you are comfortable, could you share some contact information in the chat if folks have any further questions? And then we're going to pivot to Kayla.
Thanks, y'all. So again, my name is Kayla Blau. I am going to speak a bit about some of the strategies that I used, some advocacy strategies when I was working on the ground at a domestic violence shelter. I think, speaking to Brad's point about relationship building and going back to the OEO piece, one of the most poignant, I would say, stories I have, one of the hardest situations that I worked with was a student that was receiving a disproportionate discipline. He was one of the only Black students at his middle school and was pretty much being blamed for anything that happened in the school building. So after we worked with, we tried to have restorative meetings with the principal and the staff there and had multiple care team meetings and nothing was working. We did go through the dispute resolution process. I should have hit up Rose and it might've been a different outcome, but it was just on the district level. And so unfortunately we didn't, they sided with the school basically, but the piece I wanna highlight is that process built so much trust between me and that student and family, because the student was feeling like he was unheard and no one was listening to him in the school building or really valuing his experiences. And so he came back, actually, he was 12 when this happened. He came back as an 18-year-old and said, "Thank you so much for listening. That really meant a lot to me." So even if you push and it doesn't get, to the outcome that you or the family is wishing for, at the very least, it will build trust between you and that family. And in a system that has historically harmed students of color, then that is really key to keep the families engaged in school and to support the students in the best way possible. Another strategy that I want to lift up is proactively reaching out to school districts. And so that could look like inviting the McKinney-Vento liaison to your staff meeting at your nonprofit, or trying to break down those silos by hosting meetings where folks from multiple different nonprofits and school buildings can come together and brainstorm on how to support students better. I think when I was working at the shelter, I would get really frustrated when I contacted McKinney-Vento, and I'm like, it's taking 3 days to respond. This kid needs transportation. And then when I switched over to work for McKinney-Vento and had over 500 students on my caseload, and that was the lowest, some of my coworkers had over 1,000 students they were coordinating services for, I could understand why it might take some time. So to keep that in mind, and especially now with COVID, to have empathy for ourselves and for each other, our coworkers and those that we are working alongside, and to just approach that communication with care, and to take care of yourselves so you can continue advocating. I know that these systems are, red tape is aplenty, I can say. So I know it can be so frustrating, and I really want to just give props to everyone on this call for continuing to push and advocate, especially when it can be, it can seem like nothing can change. But I wanted to lift up one example of that. At the shelter, it was one of the only confidential domestic violence shelters left in the county, where we had some of the most lethal abusers and folks that were fleeing domestic violence staying with us. And so not just in our shelter, but across the community, we were hearing stories of abusers calling up schools. And, abusers are known to be very charming. So they would talk to the secretary and say, oh, my wife gave me her address, but I lost it. Can you give it to me? And because there was nothing flagged on the student record, that the secretary had given it to them in a few situations, which was a very severe safety concern, obviously, for our families. And so we went to the attendants and to, the school district and tried to see if there was a way to mark somewhere on their school record that this confidentiality piece is really key. It could mean life or death, and I'm not trying to be dramatic, that's just the reality of it. We were told that, here's the red tape, we were told that that little C, confidentiality on the student record, is only for students that are, or families that are enrolled in the address confidentiality program through Olympia, which is a program that protects the location of people that are in violent situations and reroutes their mail through Olympia so that their address isn't exposed. And unfortunately, at that time, the ACP program was only allowing folks to register if they had a set address. So folks that were in transition or staying in a shelter like ours that was only 4 to 6 weeks were not eligible to apply to that program, but obviously still needed that confidentiality for their safety of themselves and their children. And so it took probably about a year of advocating and banding together with other shelters in our area so that we could come as a united front to the school district, working with McKinney-Vento on those relationships that we had already built to try to push basically for the attendance and for the registrar to be able to add that confidential piece. And so I think it's just important to keep in mind that even though that these systems are historically and in the present oppressive and are archaic and can really be siloed with a lot of red tape, it's important to understand that these systems are just made up of people, and that red tape can be adapted and shifted if we band together and push for the change for the rights of our students and families that we work with. So again, thank you all for the work that you do. Keep taking care of yourselves so you can keep on pushing for the rights of students and families you're working with.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla, Adam, and Brad. Like you said, handling it with care and handling communication yourself with care is really important. This work is not easy, as we have experienced. And so thank you all for continuing doing that work and being that partner. Just really briefly, we're going to move into our eco mapping activity, but I do want to allow space if there's any pressing questions that you want to ask. Obviously, the chat room The chat box is available, but if anyone wants to mute and just ask a question, I just want to make sure we have some opportunity for you to speak. Like I said, we do want it to be an engagement activity. So. All right. All right, so we're gonna go into our eco mapping. Kicking off today's activity, an eco map or mapping is a graphical representation that shows all of the systems at play in an individual's life. Eco maps are used in an individual and family counseling within the social work and nursing profession, but a lot of different professions have also adopted this in different ways. They are often a way of portraying systems theory in a simplistic way that both the social worker or the case manager, whoever is working with the client, can look at during their session. I'm going to give an example of one of my regional partners. This is an example of the Rented Innovation Zone Partnership Service Providers Meeting. There's about 4 or 5 action committees. I am on the basic need team, and they're doing some amazing work at the Rented Innovation Zone Partnership in partnership with the Rented School District. This basic need committee, we highlighted the network of providers and their regional reach to highlight how they show up into the work. As you can see, it's very specific in the age their agencies serve, the demographic and the race, the neighborhoods. Some will go as far as down to South King County, so not necessarily just, some are just a specific hill of Renton, some parts are all of Renton, and as you can see, Auburn, Federal Way, and South King County shows up. The specific schools they represent, and a lot of these providers actually rely on each other to provide these support. So this is actually also a networking activity, because oftentimes you're doing parallel work with these agencies and you don't really know what actually do you do, who do you actually serve, and how can we support each other in the service gaps. So this is one that has been filled out already. I'm going to show you one that we are going to work on today. It's actually 2 parts. So today we're really going to focus on just the right side. As the CBOs who are present, in our future training, we will eventually focus on the left one, but for the time being today, just focus on your right side. We're going to start in the center. You're going to share in this breakout room. You're going to share about your CBO and what you provide. You're going to talk about the current relationship to network of service, the positive ones. So when you're in the breakout room, this is going to be your green. Think about it as we have as your agency. We have a great partnership with the attendance office because we can call and let them know about our client situation, and they're welcoming, understanding. They answer our calls. They know who we are, what we do. It's great. We love her or him or whoever's in that position in the front office in the school building. On the left side of that is, you see it highlighted in red, it's your relationships and service gaps. An example of this is we don't know who to go to when a student needs after school support. For example, they've been referred to needing reading resources, but we can't sign them up for Readers Achievers program at the elementary school and set up transportation, get them to and from where they need to be. So this is a gap because we don't know who that staff is and we don't know how that system works. And so we're going to try to focus more on all of these. Oh, and also at the top, the service provided. This is more focusing on, there's your agency, right? But then there's the focus area that you have. So you may work with the demographic of unaccompanied youth in something very specific, or you may be the after school community center across the street from the elementary. So talk about those services you provide, which is always different from the agency. And I can give an example, an agency like the YMCA, who's very big. What is your network to the CBO? Like, what is it specifically that you do at the YMCA? So think about it from that level. So I'm gonna flip it to Joey, who's going to give a little bit more of the technical direction for the breakout group so we don't lose anybody, because I find this to be very cool. So Joey, give it away.
Sweet, thank you, Mehret. So what we're going to do is I'm going to break us into 4 different breakout rooms. It'll be randomly assigned. And I know at first it's kind of like, wait, but I'm going to be with people across the state. That's totally cool. What we're doing is we're learning how to use this tool today and kind of familiarizing ourselves with that and who else is in the room. The goal is that this is then something that you can take into your community space and use with your partners. So with that, I'm going to create these 4 breakout rooms. It will ask you to join a room. If you are in the room that I'm going to be in, wait a second for me to get there. I have to put myself in manually. And then we're going to be popping into a cool tool online. So I'll see you all in there, and we're going to come back into this space about 11:55. So I'll see you in there. Open all rooms. All right, you should see that popping up and join in. If you don't, hit that breakout rooms button at the bottom of your screen and it will let you in. And Kayla, Mehret, and Samie, I will make sure you're in separate rooms. I'll move you manually. Hold on. Hey, everyone. And all righty, I think we have everyone in the room. Again.
So I'll just kick us off for the sake of time. I really hope your breakout rooms were interesting and engaging. We would love to have a couple volunteers just talk about what you learned today. If you felt like there was a call to action, unmute, let's speak, let's talk while we have this next 5 minutes, 2 minutes, sorry.
Honestly, I loved when they brought up the concern with domestic violence shelters and confidentiality, because 50% of the reason why kids come into foster care is domestic violence. And that's a concern our school district hasn't addressed. And so while she was speaking, I just sent an email to my superintendent asking for confidentiality markers and students' skyward profiles. So that was really eye-opening for me.
Great. Anyone else want to share what they learned today or what they felt like a call to action is?
I felt like some clarification on the McKinney-Vento, what the actual law says, not what we're necessarily told by the district, because I've had students, I'm like, they've been living with grandma for 5 years and they nope, they're McKinney-Vento because they don't live with the parents, what the district has told us. So it's nice to hear what the reality is, as well as having resources to be able to say, no, this is what McKinney-Vento is, as well as the transportation. We did have that issue this year with families being told they had to transport themselves because there were no buses available, no bus drivers available. So just having more information, I think, will be helpful in the future.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up. It is noon on the dot, and I know folks probably have to jump to other meetings. So real quick, thank you for joining us today. Please take the time to fill out the survey monkey that I shared at the beginning. I'm about to reshare as well. And if you would like to join us at the School Housing Network, I've got a link for that as well, and future trainings. So please come join us. It was so wonderful to have you in this space. And again, if you are pursuing clock hours for this, please be sure to fill out the PD Enroller survey as well. That is important to get those clock hours. And last page, here is our contact information, as well as the contact info for our wonderful partners over at OSPI and the Homeless Ed team. They are an incredible resource. Please reach out to them, or make sure your school partners are reaching out to them if they have questions and you're not really sure what's going on. They are a great resource to reach out to as well. Thank you all for being here. And this was recorded, and we will be probably posting the recording. Just hang with us while we get all that done, and the slides will be shared as well. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day.